And so I had a chance to talk to Johnny Holland, to Daniel Bullocks, to Fleury, the tight end coach, to
Griese,
to Brian Griese. And one of the very first, actually was the last conversation I had of the day. And the last question I asked him, I said, there's an awful lot of controversy about Brock Purdy's arm strength. I said, in my opinion, you either have requisite arm strength and you can make all the throws, or you have what we would call below requisite arm strength and you struggle to make all the throws. And I said, where does Brock sit in your, in your quarterbacks, as far as not with the guys they have on the roster, but just quarterbacks he's ever seen, as far as arm strength? And he's like, it's a non-issue. It's a total non-issue. He's got more than enough arm strength to make all the throws that he needs to make in this offense. And while other people may debate it externally, he made it perfectly clear. We debate a lot of things internally, but that's not one of them. So, you could say it's the company line, or you could say that's just him being totally frank and direct and honest with his appraisal. But at least publicly, in the eyes of Brian Griese, this arm strength debate that Brock has, and of course, granted, this is all pre-elbow. I didn't ask him what he looked like in the last 48 hours.
right?
But as far as Brian Griese's concerned, arm strength and Brock Purdy, it's a non-story. They feel like he has plenty of arm strength and can make all the throws. Does that do anything to your opinion or your thought process on a topic that has been openly debated most of this offseason, the arm strength of Purdy, either after the surgery or really even before?
No.
Doesn't change anything.
I didn't have an issue with his arm strength before. I didn't participate in that debate.
Right. You really did.
His arm is, in fact, I was actually pleasantly surprised by the fact that his arm felt more closer to NFL average than it felt weak over the course of last year. I expected his arm to be weak, Larry. I really did. It was weak when you watched him at Iowa State. His arm, when he played last year in the NFL, was 100%, about average NFL arm strength. I didn't, find there to be a real palpable difference between his arm strength versus Jimmy Garoppolo's. I think Garoppolo does maybe generate a little more RPMs off of more unique platforms, but otherwise, when they're both, just ripping it from a clean pocket, I don't know if there's a large difference there. And one of the first things I said when I watched him in that Miami game is when you compared his arm next to Tua's arm, watching them side by side, drive after drive, right? You were able to see that he had the stronger arm than Tua. Now, Tua has probably the weakest arm of any starting quarterback in the NFL, but I didn't look. There's a lot of debates about Brock Purdy, I think, that are to be had. The arm strength one, I guess you would prefer a quarterback to have a stronger arm, but I don't think lack of arm strength is going to, at least as of what we saw last year, I don't think lack of arm strength is going to be the reason why Brock Purdy fails, right? Like, if Brock Purdy fails, we're not going to say because his arm was like Christian Ponder, that's why he failed. No, there's a plethora of reasons we can talk about and point to, but I'm not going to sit here and expect that reason to be, oh, dude, he just didn't have NFL arm strength. No, he has an average NFL arm. It's fine. It's whatever.
Well, you piqued my curiosity with that answer. So if I said to you, Brock Purdy's future in the NFL, what is an issue that if Brock Purdy fails, what will be the reason in your mind?
He got too comfortable playing outside of structure, got way too comfortable with it, started running out of the pocket too much, got too enamored with his own playmaking, and got away and never got back to playing just, hey, whatever's there, taking advantage of it. I thought he left some plays on the field a lot last year, and he talked about this too. If you notice, one of the first things he said, and I love how introspective he is, Larry, in all of these pressers, he mentioned how he wants to maximize the play that's there and not get too enamored with his confidence in his playmaking, because he has a ton of confidence in that. And so if I think he fails, it's because I don't think he's built to play this play style where if he's not constantly delivering on time and on schedule, yes, he has this playmaking about him, but I don't think his game, his body, everything is built for him to last 17 games in the NFL playing that much freelance and off-schedule football. So if he failed, I think that's what I would point to. I'd be like, hey, that's why he failed. Not because, hey, his arm could, sure, Larry, like there's no doubt I would prefer for his arm to be stronger, but I don't think his arm being stronger, not being strong enough is a question. It's plenty strong to be able to operate this offense just fine.
That's what I saw as well. But I do understand the people that, because I'm trying to understand where people are coming from. And I think there's just a concern among some portion of the Niner audience that in a league that does have Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert and some guys who throw the ball exceptionally well, Josh Allen, guys who are 6'6", 220, 230, that maybe the stature, whether we're talking about arm strength or not, just the stature of Purdy isn't good enough to compete for Super Bowls in a league that has quarterbacks that have, bigger stature, bigger physical profiles. What would you say to those who say, you know what, I like Brock Purdy and I really like everything he's done, but I'm really concerned because I see this league as having a number of Patrick Mahomes type stature guys that are big physical guys who can make incredible plays with their arm. And in some cases, incredible plays with their legs. If you want to talk about Josh Allen, I mean, he's really the total package in a lot of ways.
Right.
And the overall skill set of a Brock is not on that level. And I want my Niners to be able to contend for Super Bowls. And I don't know that they can in a league that has those kinds of quarterbacks while you have this kind of a quarterback.
Yeah, I think there's two parts to that argument. One, I hate when we reduce just talking about those guys and we just talk about their arm strength. I think there's an ability that they have to throw the ball that just goes beyond their arm strength. Like, not every quarterback with a strong arm has their gifts, the Herberts, the Mahomes. We're talking about, like Larry, if we start ranking some of the greatest, like just pure throwers in NFL history, Mahomes is right in there with Rodgers and Marino and Elway. And Allen's probably somewhere up there on that list too. And, somebody like Justin Herbert's probably not too far off from the top of that list as well. There's Brady who'll be somewhere near the top. So, like, they're generational talents in terms of how they throw the football, right? And then you have Burrow, who doesn't have maybe the same arm power as them, but his accuracy and ball placement is scary, unbelievable. He's also an unbelievable passer and thrower. And so I think that ideally you would like to have one of that's hilarious. I think ideally you would like to have one of those guys, Larry. There's no doubt you would. But if you don't have one of them, you have to deal with what you have. And, like, I do understand the line of thinking that you might think Brock Purdy might not be able to compete with them. But if he's your best possible option, then it's kind of what you're stuck with. The only way to compete with one of them is by finding one of them. But it's not easy to find Patrick Mahomes. It's not easy to find Josh Allen. If it was easy, the Niners would have their version of him too.
My take on this whole quarterback stature thing is that there's no doubt in my mind that you have to have special traits to be a big-time winner in the NFL. Mm-hmm. Special traits. But this is where me and other people part ways, is that I see special traits in Brock Purdy. They may not be height or, the highest level arm strength in the entire league. But to me, I see special traits of competitiveness, intellect, football IQ, touch, timing, courage. I see special traits. And if you think about it, the NFL has had a lot of different body types win. Russell Wilson has won a championship. He's 5'11". Drew Brees has won a championship. He's 6 feet. Steve Young has won a championship. He's probably under 6'1". You know, you look at you know, it's like every guy who wins. I mean, Jalen Hurts almost won a championship this year. Jalen Hurts is not a particularly big person, but there are special traits to Jalen Hurts, and there's a seriousness and a intellect and a resourcefulness and a movement ability that is high level.
The running is also special, right? He's got what, like 25 rushing touchdowns in the last 2 years. That's unheard of.
Even beyond the running, I'll just say even greater than that. If you do your homework on Jalen Hurts, and I know you have, the leg strength that he possesses is clearly special. I mean, he's on a totally different level than a lot of quarterbacks. So do you need to be an outlier to win in the NFL? Yeah, you really do. But you don't necessarily. I was watching the Joe Montana Peacock documentary, the first episode, and going back to Joe, it's like Joe was, I think, in a lot of ways like Brock, from the standpoint of he was a great athlete that people didn't necessarily see as a great athlete until after he had already won. Like, Joe was skinny, but Joe also could dunk in high school and was a great incredible basketball player, incredible football player, but he had athletic gifts of quickness and jumping ability and lower body explosion that nobody saw.
Right.
And we're hearing about it afterwards, but I didn't see that.
I think that's some of the David versus Goliath obsession with the media and romanticizing that particular story, right? And they love creating a Rudy atmosphere with football players where it's like, see, he's not the biggest, he's not the fastest, he's not the strongest. And then, like, for example, right, they love the Jerry Rice 4.7 40 story, right? But then you watch Jerry Rice on the football field and he's outrunning angles of guys who, you know, probably ran 4.4 at the combine. And it's like, the 4.7 always has this tag with Jerry Rice that he's not fast. But really, on the football field, he was incredibly fast. Nobody could catch him. So he was really fast. And so I know exactly what you're talking about, right? Like, I heard Sean Payton talking about it this year when he used to talk about Drew Brees, right? Drew Brees is a phenomenal athlete at his size. Drew Brees could dunk a basketball, apparently, at 6 feet. But just because, you know, Drew Brees was smaller in stature, we don't like to think about him as having special physical gifts as well. I totally understand what you're talking about. It's just the media. They love telling that story. With Brady, how many years have we told the story with Brady without realizing the fact that he was drafted out of high school in the MLB to play catcher, and he's got an absolute howitzer for an arm? And there's a reason why he threw the ball without having an issue in Foxborough for 19 years in the playoffs in the snow, and he could rip it through the snow because he's got a great arm. But like when we talk about top arms, all of that, Brady, we don't, for whatever reason, ever talk about. Did you see what he was doing last year at like 45? He was still throwing strikes. Because while we're on this conversation, right, because you did bring it up to talk about Purdy before we got sidetracked.
Right.
So you think, in your opinion, and to be fair, you've been seeing this from before he even played the 8 games. You think Purdy does have a unique, just as we talked about with those other great players, you think there's a unique eliteness about Purdy too?
A unique what about Purdy?
You think there's unique qualities that are elite about him that make him elite too, just as we talked about with Brees, right? With Brees, it was that he was the technical expert. He played the position as perfect as you could play it. Also a very good athlete, very accurate player, right? And like that, you similarly, just what are the things that made each one of these individual guys great? They had a few things they were elite at. You think Purdy has a few things just like that are elite about him?
I do. I think he's an elite competitor, and I can recognize that personality type. It takes me back to the first interview that I did with him. I did an interview with him, and at the tail end of the interview, a young lady, and I forget who it was, media person, came up and was standing right there. And her first question, so I was done. I shook hands with them. Thanks, Brock. Appreciate your time, man. And I was just maybe walked 2 steps to the right. This other woman walked over, and she's like, you are Mr. Irrelevant. Okay, this is early on in his 49er tenure. And I looked over at him, and he kind of shot me a glance, and it was like, the guy's a good guy, and he's a rookie on a new team, and he doesn't want to get mad, but he's disgusted by that question. You know what I mean? Some guys would be like, yeah, and like kind of, and he, played along. Oh yeah, shucks, just glad for an opportunity. He said all the right things. Wasn't rude to her at all, but there was a look on his face like, you gotta be freaking kidding me. I'm so much more than that. And it's just like, I recognized it as kind of disgust, but he didn't want to be rude to her. And he knew that she wasn't trying to be rude to him. So he just wore it and gracefully, answered the question and moved on. But I could see this burning, seething kind of like beneath the surface. You know what? That's not my standard. That's some designation that is attached to the final pick of the draft. I didn't want to be that. I never asked for this. And it's like, it's not embarrassing because I didn't do anything wrong, but it's also not me. And it's like, he didn't want to be defined by it. And you could just see that this guy had an expectation for himself that far exceeded getting drafted and far exceeded the idea of Mr. Irrelevant. And he was polite and nice about it, but you could see the competitor. He kind of showed himself right there. And I remember looking at him going, you know what? This guy is on a trajectory that's far greater than Mr. Irrelevant. And people are going to soon know. And to me, I see a lot of the same traits that I saw in Tom Brady when I interviewed Tom Brady coming out of at the East West Shrine practices in the '99 lead up to that draft. Tom Brady was like very humble, but how can you be both humble and extremely cocky at the same time?
Yeah,
I don't know, but Tom Brady is, and so's Brock Purdy.
It's a special innate self-belief, right? And I do think, look, I'm not ready to go to the same place that you just went. I'm
not saying he's Tom Brady. I'm saying
no.
Personality-wise, I recognize those similarities.
Hey, I see bang on for sure. I think he has traits that project to him being elite. Frankly, Larry, I don't know. I'm waiting to find out a little bit with him. I'm open to the idea. We'll see. I'm willing to find out. I'm not one of these people that has closed the door on what his ceiling might be. I'm pretty much just wait and see on what's going to happen with his career. But I do think what has not been credited enough to him, Larry, is just how he's handled himself in that moment, being 23 years old, the same age as me. So I guess I can identify with it a little bit just from a life perspective standpoint of being all of a sudden thrust into, getting handed the keys to the world's greatest car, but you got to make sure you drive that car to the location. And he not only drove the car to the location, he sped the car to the location, right? And there was a lot of pressure that came with that. And I thought it was incredible that throughout all of that pressure, it felt like he never lost his poise, right? There was never a fish out of water moment that you see often for rookies. And you totally understand it because sometimes the moment can just get too big for them. It's not that they're mentally weak or anything like that. It's just that at that point, they aren't mentally mature enough to handle the pressures that come with that moment. That never happened to Brock Purdy. And I think there is something to be said to that because there's a lot of really good quarterbacks that we've seen lose their poise just because the pressure of the moment gets to them. And there is a quality to Purdy that is, I don't want to say Brady-esque. It's just Brady-esque in the sense that he seems to always have his poise. And I do think the important thing in that conversation is I think there was an article written by Matt Barrows. I want to say it was Barrows. That might have been one of the Athletic guys. So it could have been Lombardi, maybe Marcus Thompson. But it was one of these people. And it was an excellent article about Brock Purdy. And he knows who he is because he's gone through something in life that gave him that perspective, right? And in college, apparently his dad's business started to fail and his family started to lose some money.
Right.
And that affected their situation financially. And in that moment, Brock Purdy understood, hey, Family and football are the two things that are most important to me. And I think the fact that he's gone through that, the fact that he knows who he is, he knows how to handle adversity. I do think there's a lot of credit that needs to be attributed towards that. Now, does that project to him being a great starting quarterback? We'll find out, Larry. That's for his career to eventually tell us that. But in terms of just a player that seems to have unlimited poise, he seems to have that. And I do think there hasn't been enough credit given to simply the fact, like, I understand how easy the situation was, Larry, because it was in a lot of ways very easy, but I've seen Jimmy Garoppolo, lose his poise in moments, and he's a veteran player. It's just the moment feels like it gets too big for him. A couple of hits, a little bit of pressure, he starts getting rattled. And Purdy never got rattled, and I think that's a special quality to him, and we'll find out if that turns him into an all-time great quarterback.